Hello, and welcome to the Vulnerability Junkies podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Jamie. On this podcast, we talk about the scary, vulnerable parts of our personal and professional growth, our identities as second-generation Asian Canadians, and talking about our feelings.
Do you get excited about networking, or do you convulse at the thought?
In today's episode, we discuss how our relationship with networking has evolved over time and the joys of connecting people to each other. Let's get into it.
We're back.
How you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling good because I just drank my hot water. But yeah, I've been recovering from the flu. So I've been holed up and bedridden for like 5 days. And so I'm literally like jittery energy right now because I haven't seen a soul or done anything productive in days. So I think I'm like nines today. I'm like 9 physically and also a 9 emotionally,
Whoa.
which is interesting.
What's the flavor of the emotional 9?
It's just excitement, just doing stuff. I feel like I'm ready to go. You know, all I've been doing is sleeping and like watching shows and movies. So my body is just ready to do stuff again. And this definitely counts as doing stuff. So yeah. What are you at?
I'm feeling pretty good. I am also kind of like jittery, and I don't know why exactly. Like, I didn't sleep a ton and I didn't have very much caffeine today. And the caffeine I did have was like, 12 hours ago. So I'm just kind of bubbling with energy the whole day to the point where it was actually like distracting. Now I'm feeling a little bit calmer and ready to channel some of that energy into some conversation. Yeah, I'm like an 8 emotional and like an 8.5 physical. So that's where I'm at.
Wow. Yeah, we're crushing it today. I think I don't know where your line is, but for me, anything above an 8, I consider like extraordinary or like very good, like on either of the scales. So for both of us to be above an 8 today is like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. We can get to that maybe
Sure.
afterwards. Today on Vulnerability Junkies, we want to talk about networking. I think I have thoughts, but I know for you personally that you've been in a life situation where you've, I guess, had to embrace networking a lot recently. And we also started talking a bit before the pod about how your feeling towards the idea of networking has evolved over time. So I'd love to start there, get your take, and then I can share and we can go from there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think part of my changing feelings about this has to do with like mechanically what networking is here and like what the people's goals are going into it. I still am not a huge fan of the situation where it's like a show floor of people showing out the different companies and then people walking by with resumes. There's something about that dynamic that has always felt a little weird to me because I think it really strongly encourages people to show up with weird kind of proving energy in a public setting. And I just think that it's not particularly conducive to like really connecting with people, which I don't enjoy. So, okay, I'll talk more about my actual circumstance now. So for the last year and a bit since I left my job, a lot of what I've been doing has been exploring the climate tech landscape. So what that means is the kind of network of people and organizations that are working on building technology to help fight climate change. And in my case, particularly the early stage companies doing that. And in this industry, I'm like absolutely a newcomer. And it's a really big, complicated industry. And a lot of it is like pretty opaque. It's like it's pretty hard to figure out how different things work. And part of what I've been doing last year was I was trying to play the role of a climate tech investor. And what that meant was I was genuinely interested in learning what different companies were doing to help orient me in the space and also potentially to invest in their companies. So I think that part of what feels really different about this to me now is it feels much less transactional. Like part of why the networking events before felt a little weird to me is they always had the sense for me, at least the way I would engage with them, as let me go talk to someone and then on the spot convince them that I have value as an employee and, oh God, please hire me. Whereas in these settings, I'm like genuinely trying to understand what these people are trying to do with their work and trying to figure out if they have problems that I can help with. So it's changed things by, first of all, I try to do a lot more of this in one-on-one conversations. I have been to networking events as well, but even then, I think that having a sense of clear values alignments with people that are there makes a difference. But a lot of the things that I've found really valuable have been one-on-one conversations. And that could be like, tell me about like more about what your company's been doing. Tell me about the challenges you've been running into. Tell me how I can help. Uh, in the process of talking to them, I'll always be keeping in the back of my head people they might talk to. So I've been trying to connect people that I think have interesting like cross-pollination of ideas or might have relevant shared network, and feeling like I'm participating in this like very clearly non-zero sum game. And I'm not, I guess crucially, I'm also not competing against the other people in the room, has changed the feeling of it a lot for me. So that's like kind of one dimension of this. And there's more, but I guess I'll stop there so we can talk a little bit more about what I just said.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What I heard was, do you think it's that there's two kind of examples here, right? One is like a job fair where you're just walking around trying to convince people to hire you. And the other one, you've recently decided to jump into this new climate tech space. You're in a mode where you just want to learn, meet a lot of people, see what they're working on, and, trying to learn things from them, but also figuring out ways that you could also contribute value and otherwise help these people as well. And that feels much more authentic. Maybe that's the key, right? Where in the first example, it's kind of like, it's really transactional, it sounds like, right? Where I have to show up here and I have to do the social dance of hello, nice to meet you. But really the recruiter or whoever you're talking to is just a conduit between you and this company that you want to convince to hire you. So you're kind of like forced in a way to like smile and, I don't know, sound interesting, ask good questions, but it's all like mechanical, right? Because it's all for this very functional, tactical, kind of calculated goal of just notice me and hire me, please. Thank you. I don't actually care about you as a human. Like, just give me a job.
Yeah. And like, as you were talking about it, it occurred to me that it's not just transactional on one side in those situations. It's literally that each of the people going there has a job to do. And the students, I think, frequently are like, if I could not come to this event and have the same outcome, I absolutely would not come to this event. And similarly, the company sending recruiters, like, they don't necessarily want to be there, but they've been told by their companies, like, go to this thing, we need to recruit people.
Yeah, exactly. So my personal experience being in that situation as well, like, obviously I've also been there. You feel kind of fake, like everything from the smile to like me trying to ask all these questions to it. I'm just really trying to have a conversation that will hopefully help you remember me. And then I need to get to the point where I say, here's my resume, and then I can leave. But it's good to point out that it's also true on the other side. Like, recruiters, like, it's kind of this dance that we all know what's going on, right? The recruiter obviously is aware of this. So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's pretty intuitive. What I want to dig into a little and pull at is the commonalities, right? Because in a different way, in this situation where you feel much more be able to be authentically you and show up as, a more genuine version of yourself, in some ways there's a different kind of dance going on, right? Like when people sign up for these one-on-one networking chats with you, or when you go to these networking events, people similarly have a set of objectives. And their first priority is not to like genuinely and authentically connect with other humans. It's somewhat still like tactically oriented. Like, I don't want to use the word calculated, but people are going in there with like a job to do. Like, I want to learn about these things. I would like to, I don't know, get new potential clients or things like that, right? I'm curious, like, what's different?
It's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the ability to be really transparent with your motives. So I think, for instance, if you show up to a job fair and the first thing out of your mouth is like, I need a job, it's a little bit off-putting, and you need to like do this dance of trying to show interest in the company in other ways. But I think oftentimes people they're not genuinely showing up to learn about the companies and then have a secondary motive of figuring out where they want to work or where to apply to. They're going with the primary motive of getting the resumes into other people's hands and trying to apply for jobs, but they need to pretend that they're not. And I think similarly, recruiters are trying to get these people to, they're trying to figure out how to get the resumes of the right people. And in some ways, like their job is to sort through people quickly. Um, but they also can't be totally transparent with those motives. Whereas now when I'm talking to people, I literally start off by saying like, I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. I'm trying to learn about this space. I want to learn from you because you have a lot of knowledge in the space. Like, can you please talk to me about the problems you have? And I found that at least some subset of people just love talking about what's going on with them. So it doesn't feel like either of us are, it's not exactly hiding your intention because it's like, it's so obvious what the actual thing is, but just being really direct about what you want in that situation, I think helps it feel much more authentic. Even though it is in a different sense transactional, uh, it's transactional, but like, I think that the transaction you're trying to do in that situation is a thing you both genuinely want. And I do like genuinely find learning directly from people about like how the thing they're doing that I've never done before works. I find that actual act intrinsically satisfying. Whereas like, I did not find the act of putting a resume in someone else's hands intrinsically motivating. So the intentions behind each of the people showing up, I think, are quite different now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hearing that, even though both are transactional, your ability to actively and explicitly label that and being upfront about that with other people just lets you own that transactionalness, whatever the flavor of it is in that moment. And then that's where the congruence comes from. And that's why you're able to be more authentic, because you're just like, hey, I'm just here to learn about this industry. I'm going to do that.
Exactly.
And if that's okay with you, then great. Let's do that.
And I think that it, being really direct about what you want allows the other person to ignore you or say no, and allows you to trust that if they say yes, it's because they genuinely want to help with the thing that you asked for. Whereas, I don't know why this analogy is coming to mind, but like, it's definitely a pattern that I've seen. I mean, I've seen this happen in dating on both sides, but definitely I've had more female friends talk about these experiences where guys will ask to hang out and it's like not really clear what their intentions are. So then like, it's super awkward for them to say no because they think it might be them trying to ask for romantic interest, even though they're not romantically interested. Whereas if they're upfront about their intentions in either direction, then it just puts both parties at ease more. So I think just like having confidence and clarity about the other person's motive really helps eliminate a lot of the awkwardness and the fakeness. I mean, the thing that's pulling me is I want to hear more about the experiences you've had with networking, because the perception I have is that your relationship to networking has been pretty different for a long time, and that you've managed to lean into parts of this and genuinely enjoyed it. For instance, like I think back in school, I never would have thought about applying to something like the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship, because I viewed that as kind of this like networky thing. But everyone I know that's been through it seems like they've genuinely really enjoyed their experiences. So that suggests to me that much earlier in life, you had a different perception towards networking than I did. And I want to know more about that so that I can like update my own perspectives on these things.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I've always had some form of relationship with the word networking. I think I started doing the networking thing pretty early on in life. Like at 14, 15, I was going to like conferences, organized, like, I don't know. My first conference ever it was called Changing the World Conference. It was hosted at the University of Toronto, and it was actually really cool. My parents signed me up for it, actually. I was like 13. I was like in 8th grade, and I swear this was like a university like level, like it's organized by university students or like new grads for university students or working professionals. And I was like 13 in the audience. And that was the first time I just like went to go to a talk, and I had to like experience what that was like, meet people, or had the opportunity to meet people, go up and ask the speaker questions and things like that. So I started super early, and then I don't know, I've always been social. So I've always been associated as someone that is good at networking, whatever that means. I think I just like talking to people and connecting, and that kind of, I like interesting conversations, and that kind of manifests when you put me in those situations where it's just a room of people, I just start talking, and then, it starts to go from there. I think over time starting earlier made me get jaded also way earlier though.
Oh,
Like I was kind of really over it by the time I was like, I don't know, 17, 18,
mm,
19. I was like, super done. Just like, cause you get a sense for the mechanics that we just talked about, right? The
yeah.
fakeness, the lack of genuineness that tends to underlie everything. Cause everyone has motives, right? That's kind of especially if you go to, I also did DECA in high school. And so like, DECA is like a business group, where there are also conferences and events, and all these business-minded, keener kids in high school would get together at least like twice a year, for these big events, and you would like meet a lot of people,
Mhm.
right? You would network with industry experts and network with like, I don't know, other people from other schools, etc. Um, so there are some people that really leaned into it a lot, like these like the fakeness persona. You get a sense of what that fake energy is like, and once you have a taste for it, I think you are forever
Mm,
turned off from networking
mm,
events, because you're like, I'm like talking to this person, but they're like very clearly like there's like a barrier here. Like they have a mask on,
yeah.
kind of, right? Like they're just being like way too enthusiastic about everything that I'm saying. I don't even think they're really listening to what I'm saying. They know that they need to seem engaged and ask good questions, but you're not actually having a dialogue with the person. And I think once you have a flavor of that, ugh, that's
Ugh.
the ickiness for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. I was saying before as well, like the word connect for me, like because I had started so early on, I guess, like in my mind is a networking
Hmm.
term. And it wasn't until doing RBTL like last year that I realized that the word connect has real meaning.
Yeah.
Like literally for like 10 plus years of my life, the word connect was just another word for like, I want to add you to my professional network for my own gain and benefit
Right.
down the road. Like that's what I meant to me. Like, let's connect. It's even, I mean, yeah, when I say that, the visceral thing that comes to mind is like LinkedIn's default
Right.
message. When you add somebody, you're like,
Oh,
I'd
I
like to connect
hate
with
that
you.
phrasing.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
I think
that's the connotation that I
I
have with
think
this
like
word
I
for so
I
long.
mean, I hate the connotation broadly, but there's something especially gross about the fact that LinkedIn autofills it. Like the idea of
Yeah, right.
some it's almost like imagine I walked up to you, I took out a button out of my pocket, I pushed the button, and then it said, "Let's connect." Like there's something about that that just feels so grimy to me. I absolutely hate it. I hate these default messaging things like that.
Yeah,
It's also like
exactly. So I don't know.
it's also like, wish this person a happy birthday, and there's like a pre-filled message that says happy birthday. You press a button. It's just like, ugh, so gross. Can't stand it.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is maybe the crux of the whole topic is just like this idea of
Yeah.
authenticity and whether or not what you're getting is authentic, right? Like that happy birthday thing, it's just like there's some degree, there are like leading indicators of authenticity, right? With the happy birthday thing, like effort is kind
Hmm.
of one of them, right? Like, do you actually mean this when you say happy birthday? Or are you just clicking some buttons
Hmm.
because it's easy, right? Similar for LinkedIn. So I think like over time, as I've, been super jaded and was just like, I hate networking, small talk sucks. I'm never going to engage with this networking thing
Mm.
again. And then eventually realizing that like it happens kind of
Hmm.
naturally because I mean, to zoom all the way back out, right? Like the way that they teach you what networking is like in a, I don't know, calculated businessy school type manner is that like, there's that saying, right? It's not what you know, it's
Yeah.
who you know. Um, and it's predicated on this idea that which is a really good truth in a way, is that like trust kind of is the very valuable currency that the world
Hmm.
runs on, right? Like I think that's really what people mean when they say that, right? Like because the examples that they give you is like, oh, like 70% of the job market is like not advertised, and you can only get to it by networking. Um, all the like best deals are done with people that you know through networking. And it's like all these things, right? Like I feel like as I was growing up, networking was always put on this pedestal because of the way it could open doors for you. It's always framed with respect to like, man, there's so much value you could get from just knowing the right people, who could connect you with the right opportunities, and it could change your life,
Hmm.
blah, 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 blah. And in a way it's true, right? It's just like the best types of networking kind of have flavors of what you're describing now, where it's like, it's it starts off authentic. It starts off like not really about those
Mhm.
opportunities at all. It's just like in my mind, the gold standard of what we would call quote unquote networking is like, I'm just really good friends with really good people, and they tend to be really competent and interesting because I am also competent and interesting. And, I work on things and I share this with my friends. And then at some point, the people will be like, hey, I heard you're doing a podcast. Like, I have this, I don't know, a friend who's like a, I don't know, really successful podcaster. Would you like to talk to them,
Mm.
or would you like to have them on your podcast? And like, these are the natural mechanisms, right, by which these outcomes happen. But there was kind of at some point, like some type of mechanical reverse engineering process where it was like, man, this person that I know got to these outcomes because they networked, quote unquote. And then they try to like, mechanize it and systematize
Yeah.
it. And then like that just robs it of all the authenticity, right? When they try to make it mechanical. Um, but those are extremes, right? On the two ends of the spectrum. One is like, you're not authentic at all, and you're just here to meet people for the sake of how they can help you. And it's very one-sided. And, they're basically fake with you because they think that they can extract value from, you
Right.
or something. And then there's the other side where it's like totally
Yeah.
unintentional, where it's just, pure serendipity. I'm just doing my thing, happen to be surrounded by cool people, and then all these snowball things happen, right? There's probably a middle ground, which I think is like, like that's kind of in my mind the holy grail, where you want to you want to be intentional about it in some ways, but not to the point where it's like, you're showing up in a fake, lying, inauthentic kind of way, just to like use somebody. I think
Right.
that's what I've been trying to get to this whole time. Like you just want to use somebody for, I don't know, personal gain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like how you called out this difference between having a really good network that emerges naturally from being intentional about cultivating good relationships with people versus I'm going to build a network so that I have a professional network. And I totally agree with you that I think that the way we ended up with a lot of the second is people started to recognize that some of the people that were really effective or really like successful by some conventional metrics for that did have these really expansive networks where they knew everyone. But the mistake that many people made was they looked at that and then they said, okay, the important thing there is the number of people. So how do I increase my number of people in kind of like the same kind of confused way that someone might say, oh, like people say that to live a happy life, you need really good friends. And then they thought that the game to play there was how do they add the most people that they can on Facebook when those are just like really not the same thing. And it sounds like for you, you went through a period where you're much younger, where you're thrust into a networking world where you were really good at building up that network, but it felt really fake. You noticed you didn't enjoy being in that environment. And you really burnt out in the process. Whereas I think I kind of just skipped that step. Like I never went really hard into the version that I didn't like. I just stepped in and was immediately like, this is not for me. Um, but eventually I think we came to a similar place where we started to recognize, wait, there's actually ways in which we can expand our networks just through genuinely following our own interests and genuinely being curious about people. Uh, Both like what they're working on professionally, but also like them as individuals. So I think that when you're asking about some middle ground, I think that's what it is. I think that the middle ground is being open and proactive about new connections, but also being clear about your own motivations and communicating those motivations clearly. Um, like I think one, yeah, I'll stop there actually. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think, yeah, there's two things that come up for me. One is kind of a personal story that I
Yeah,
like forgot about actually,
we
that
love
might be worth
stories
sharing.
here.
Um, there was basically a point, like when you were recapping like the arc that I
Mm.
drew, I have mentioned situations. I mentioned a situation where I was talking to somebody and I could clearly tell that they were like I wasn't really talking to them despite them being there and nodding and vigorously smiling and, I don't know, giving all these
Do you
social
want to
cues.
paint like an even more
I've
specific picture? Like when, like where was this? Like what was the setting?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's not one. I've been to too many conferences at this point, but like definitely like one of the many conferences that I've been to. You can just imagine myself. Um, for some reason, this one particular one comes to mind. It was the uh, Canadian Undergraduate
Old Maid,
Technology
CUTC.
Conference. Yeah. That conference was really popular, I think, at some point. It's kind of, I think it's still alive today, so no offense. But at some point, I think I went in 2013, and it was at what was at the time called Ryerson University. Do you know that Ryerson
I
is no
did
longer
hear
called
about that
Ryerson?
recently. Yeah.
Yeah, they renamed it. Anyway, unrelated. It was hosted at the time, Ryerson
Yeah.
University. And I just have this visceral image of me being in the hallway. I don't remember who I was talking to, but just like me. And it was like a businessy type conference, like people like dressed up. I remember some of my friends showed up in
Right.
suits. Yeah, we were like 18, 19 at the time, like just in freshman year. And yeah, I just remember being in the hall and just talking to somebody and just like having just, this person is not here right now.
Oh, man.
We're doing the dance, and I have no idea why we're doing the dance. And I'm having all this, like, it feels soul sucking when this happens, right?
Yeah.
You're like, man, why is this person even talking to me? Like, they're not interested in me as a human at all. And anyway, I just remembered that I've also been that person. I've been on the receiving end, and I've also been in situations where I was the person that was just smiling and nodding and mechanically doing all of the social cues because I wanted a connect, because I wanted an email, because I wanted, I don't know, an interview or things like that. So I did want to caveat that I've been on both sides. And then another big part of my networking journey is that I've also had a period of being networking crazy in a way, where because I was good at it and like just like adding people to like my digital Rolodex, which at the time was Facebook. I remember being really, I would collect people like Pokemon in a way.
Okay.
It sounds really bad. But in my mind, that was kind of what it felt like. It was like, oh, I've done another person for the network.
Yeah.
Stick. Like that can only be good. Because the more people you know, the better, right? I was literally the person that you're describing. Like I was playing the numbers game. And I remember at some point, yeah, I was really proud of how many people I had, but also the quality.
Okay.
To be fair, I like had met some pretty high quality people. And I would like go around, be like, yeah, you know, back then I was again, and I was as a freshman. Okay, like don't judge me for this too much, but I would literally go around and just be like, man, like I know all these people now from going to Waterloo that like work at the biggest tech companies in the world. Isn't that insane? Like this guy who lives in the same building as me, he worked at Twitter. This other person, Facebook. Like, bro, come on. And yeah, I thought it was super cool because I like knew all these really smart friends. And at some point, I had this this moment with my parents. I think I was again trying to flex on them, being like, yo, like I have friends who work at these companies, blah, blah, blah. And the implication was that like I don't know, they would be able to benefit me somehow. I wasn't just friends with them because they worked at these companies. I was just thrilled that like maybe a little too thrilled that this was true. And at some point, my mom just kind of looked at me and she was like, yeah, but that's not you though, right? Like just basically kind of smack you in the face with some harsh reality of just like, okay, so you know these people, good for you. What does that actually do for you? It's not like your friends can like do your like these coding interviews for you. They're not gonna. It's not just because you know these people. It means you're like you've made it in life. You know, like what does that even mean? Like, why are you going around flexing on the fact that you know these people? Like, don't you want to like flex on people by like the fact that like you're as good as them or something like that? And I was just like, whoa, that was kind of a moment for me. That kind of like shocked me out of my little networking high. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that was an interesting story to share. There's like, it's a little deeper than that. Cause like, I think I was definitely, this is like during my freshman year, like existential crisis, like entire sense of self-worth collapsing, clamoring for any other proxy senses of, man, I'm going to be okay. Or that like, I'm still smart and can do things. And have a sense of competence. I was definitely trying to like proxy off of these other people that I knew. And then my mother was like, that's not how it works. Slapping me in the face with some truth. But anyway, yeah, that also came back to mind of like, that was probably like peak networking craze, Kevin.
Do you think that your mom like holding you at that moment being like, yeah, but that's not you though? Do you think that that was an inflection point where you're like, huh, maybe I should stop trying to collect Pokemon and like evolve myself.
Yeah, that's basically it. That was definitely, I mean, it was a hard pill to swallow at the moment. I was like, no, you're wrong, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And I ran up to my room and then you're just like, and then it slowly sinks in. You're like, whoa, maybe, maybe she's
Yeah.
onto something. Um, yeah, I think that was definitely an inflection point and just realizing that like I was kind of telling myself that I was getting a lot of value out of putting a lot of energy and effort into doing the
Mm.
networking thing. And it was kind of the wake up moment was realizing that no, actually, like you're not getting nearly as much value out of putting all like this time, energy, and effort into this networking thing than you think. And that there are other more productive things that you really need to put your time towards instead. Um, so I think that was definitely a wake up moment. Yeah, just like shocked me out of it. Of like, yeah. Although to be fair, my motivations were a little desperate
Mm.
in a way. Anyway, it wasn't like I like it wasn't as clean of an experiment as I had from a first principles perspective thought that truly it's who I know that matters, not what I know. Like it wasn't even that.
Yeah.
It was literally just like, look at all these successful people. I want to
Yeah.
associate
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
with these successful people so that I can feel successful. Like that was
It's
it.
so, oh yeah. The kind of status games that we all either play intentionally or unintentionally. I feel like especially um in like the first couple of years of Waterloo was so interesting because I similarly remember in like first or second year walking around and then looking at the upper year students like walking around in their Google hoodies and like their Facebook hoodies. I'm like, whoa,
Oof.
like it's
Yep.
real.
Yep.
And then eventually when I was in like fourth year, I was looking around, walking at all the people walking around their Google and Facebook hoodies, and I was like, look at these scrubs. Like, we're just like just judgmental in a different way. But it's just interesting to
Yeah.
see like how fragile that kind of status chasing is and how like as much as I would have initially gravitated towards those kind of people and tried to like talk to them, the connections that ultimately persisted and ended up being way more valuable to me were the ones where I connected with people because I was like genuinely interested in what they were personally doing, not like some status marker that they were literally wearing. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Which honestly, like job titles,
yeah,
same
totally.
thing, honestly. Same
Yeah.
category.
Also, I mean, if
Um,
for the small number of younger listeners, like grades is definitely also like this. It's always there's always like the cringe
uh,
moment of looking at the freshmen coming in or looking at I don't know if they do this now. This used to be on Facebook group where people would literally do stuff like, "Nice to meet everyone. Like, what GPA are you coming in?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" But every year, at least one person would do this, uh, and it's
well,
just like it's such a terrible, useless connection point.
I don't think it's a connection point, dude. I think it's a flex point. Someone's trying to make a status statement like my GPA is higher than yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is some of that, but I think it comes from a place at some level of like, I want people to like me.
You think
I
so?
think for some of them, yeah. I don't think it's people being like, I want everyone to know that I'm better than them. I think it's like I want these people to like to respect me and to be drawn to me because I'm so smart.
Interesting. I have a totally different
Interesting.
perception. I think my thought was at worst, it was like I want to flex on these
Yeah.
scrubs. And at best, it was like I want to a nice way of putting it is find my peers.
Right.
A worse way of putting it is I want to filter out the people who are not academic in the same way as me.
Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. That's always been my interpretation of one of those two.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that I guess I can kind of see it. Like, hey, like I'm really smart. Maybe that's why you should like me and be friends with me.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh man.
Interesting.
So some now that I think we both had our perceptions towards networking change quite a lot and have kind of wandered towards a version of it that I think we're both pretty happy with, and we see the ways in which it's like fulfilling. It doesn't have this kind of fake veneer to it. I've noticed that the activities that I do that are kind of like this are different. So like ignoring the ways in which you initially talk to the person and that kind of like handshake of like, what are you doing here? Like, what do you want to talk about? How have you noticed other things that you do that feel kind of networky evolve as your relationship to networking has changed?
The word that comes to mind is it's much more pure
Mm.
now, and that like the intentions are clear in my mind. Before, I would be motivated to network for the sake of networking. But literally, this thought process happens every time I go to any type of conference or like, yeah, literally networking event. With these days, it's like, VCs or founders or people looking for
Mhm.
jobs. And at the time, it was like, oh, I don't have an immediate need to know all these venture capitalists
Mm.
yet. But one day I might, or someone that I know
Mm.
might. And that's why I went to go meet
Mm.
all of them, or like try to go meet all of them, even though I didn't really have like a reason. And I've found that the most successful type of networking happens when you actually, surprise, surprise, you actually have a reason.
Yeah.
Like if you're actually going out and building a company, turns out it's actually way easier to meet venture capitalists, to use this example a
Yeah.
little more. And the conversations just
Yeah.
flow better because you're playing the same
Right.
game. So you actually it actually becomes a genuine point of connection.
A way of
Um,
phrasing what you're saying is the best kind of relationships tend to form around a thing rather than like trying to force a relationship to happen on the idea that maybe a thing will make sense as a connection later. Like it's very different going in and saying like, I want to have this conversation because like, you know a lot about this kind of thing and I just want to know your thoughts. Um, and like I've done my research and I know some things about the subject already, but I just like genuinely want to talk to people who know stuff about this. And then from that conversation, you might emerge some kind of more, like more long-term kind of connection. But if you go in being like, I want to connect on the hypothetical future situation that we will have common ground, it's just really hard because it feels so forced.
yeah, I think yeah, I agree with that. I think what my mind is going towards now is just this idea of authenticity for sure is a key component.
Hmm.
Intentionality is in there
Mm.
as well, because these networking type relationships, they tend to be driven by like either a common topic or a common
Hmm.
interest. And I think maybe the key is to just be authentic about your intentions.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just literally here to meet you for the sake of adding you, I don't know, to my Rolodex for future endeavors, maybe I should just say
Yeah.
that. And that actually in my mind feels super congruent. And it's kind of like I can actually imagine it going very well in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I can imagine showing up to like some kind of evening event. You're talking to someone briefly, they ask you what you're working on. You're like, oh, I'm not working on anything right now, but, um, in the future I might dig into this stuff. Like, can I get your contact for when that happens? And then if that happens, I think that they would be like, yeah, sure. And then they might be like, all right, like I'm here to talk to people that have ideas right now. So I'm gonna move on. You're like, all right, cool. Whereas going the other route feels like you're kind of trying to stretch out the timeline of the conversation to get them engaged first. And the whole time they're like, why is this person talking to me? And that creates this weird kind of tension. So I agree that, yeah, just being transparent about, I feel like this is a good lesson in broadly in life, just being transparent about intentions goes a long way um, in helping people feel comfortable with
Yeah.
what your deal is.
Do you think intentionality can come off as inauthentic, like in general? Like if you're too mechanical about it, I'm just imagining a world where you can potentially be too mechanical about it. Sound like a robot, like, hello, nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. I don't really want anything from you right now, but blah, blah,
I
blah.
don't think it would come across as inauthentic. Like, for instance, like sometimes people reach out to me saying like, hey, like, I see that you worked at Figma. I'm thinking of trying to work with there and I'd love to talk to you about it. Can we connect? And that doesn't, I usually say no because I don't want to talk to someone that I have no other context on them. But like, I'm not bothered by that. I think if you're like operating in life in a way that feels aligned, you should be hearing no relatively frequently. Because I think that like in that situation, if someone just asks that kind of thing, and then like I'm either saying in that situation, I'll probably just implicitly say no by not replying. Um, then I don't feel any misalignment. Whereas like if they reach out because they said like, oh, like I read this post of yours, and then in the middle of that call, they're like, hey, I'm actually applying to a job at Figma. I'd be like, that's not cool, and then that feels bad. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I don't think it would come across as inauthentic. I think you might get rejected sometimes, but that's fine. In the same sense as like in dating, sometimes being really direct and being like, hey, like I think you're attractive. Like, do you want to go on a date sometime? I think it's like direct, it's authentic, and they might say no, and then that's fine. Um, but I can't really think of situations where being honest about your intentions comes across as inauthentic. I mean, there's things you could be honest about in terms of your intentions that are like just kind of gross. And then I don't think the problem there is authenticity. The problem is just lack of social awareness other ways. Um, but I'm having a really hard time thinking of a circumstance where being authentic would come across as forced or like insincere. Did you have something in mind that was leading you to this question?
No, just kind of reflecting on this idea in general, as it applies to relationships.
Yeah.
But maybe, yeah, that's fine. Like you were saying. In the example you gave though, what makes me eye roll when I get that from people is that I know that like at least 50% of the time, they don't actually want to talk to me. They just want a referral.
Mm,
And I reply to so many of these now. I usually only reply when they come in through like
yeah.
a friend or like a mutual connection. And the first thing I'll ask is, do you just want a
Right.
referral? Because like, and then like, I swear like at least 50% of the time, people are like, oh yeah, great. Here's my resume. End of conversation. Like, okay,
Yeah.
great. That's the stuff that kind of irks me. I'm just like, you could have just said that you wanted a referral. Like, you don't have to go through this dance of like, hey, like, you seem super interesting. We'd love to like learn about blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, and like connect and stuff. And I'm like, do you though?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
broadly people appreciate when you're transparent about your intentions. And I think that can go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
One other thing that I think has changed a lot in how I feel about is I started to feel this really warm, kind of joyful feeling when I start to connect dots between different people in my head that don't know each other and then connect them. I also, first of all, I always do the double opt-in. I always like ask both people, like, do you want to talk to this other person? But I mean, I think in the last,
Yeah. Can we PSA
yeah.
that real quick? Can you explain what a
Oh
double
yeah.
opt-in is for the world, for the
My
betterment of the
God.
world?
If you ever send me an email that introduces me to someone and you did not clear that with me ahead of time, I will be viscerally upset. So what a double opt-in means is you ask each person separately, do you want to meet this stranger, this person that you don't know yet? And the reason this is important is otherwise it creates a really weird social dynamic. Because if for instance, like I just suddenly introduce Kevin to one of my past coworkers, then in an email saying hey Kevin, this is my coworker Bob. I don't actually have a coworker Bob. My coworker Bob, who's really excited to talk about like product management stuff. Then now I'm applying immediate pressure to Kevin to respond to this quickly or give off the impression that he's like not a responsive person because it's like this is a warm introduction. Where if I'd asked ahead of time, I'd be like, hey, I'm actually not like, I don't have time right now, period. Or he might say, I don't have time right now, but if you loop me in a week later, then I can do it. So it's really important to not like offload the responsibility of managing that dynamic onto someone else that's doing you a favor by taking an introduction. Anyways, the thing I was going to say is I think from like, I don't know, from like 2015 until 2021, I probably did like 2 intros over email or over other platforms total. And then in the last year, I've probably done like 40 of these. I don't know, it's like a ballpark number. That's probably not that far off. And it's really satisfying. It's really nice to see these connections happen that either wouldn't have happened without you or wouldn't have happened as quickly. And then being able to pull from like my mental repository of like all these people that I genuinely really like, and then intentionally weaving this network around me of these people that I like and getting them to know each other. So like, for instance, and it's cool to see like the actual fallout of these things happening. So an example of this is one of my friends from South Park Commons, this incubator space that I'm in now, just like tapped me recently saying like, hey, like, do you want to go play Mahjong? And I'm like, I can't this weekend, but man, I have a friend that loves Mahjong. And then after doing the double opt-in, I introduced her to Kevin. And then like on the weekend, I got this like really cute photo of them hanging out in this like neon lit, crazy Mahjong den. And that's like the kind of network activity that I find really satisfying now is like creating these kind of connections in the world between people that I like that would not otherwise happen.
Yeah, it's a good plug. I feel like I've been crapping all over networking this entire pod. And yeah, I think that's ultimately one part of the thing that got me into networking craze, and even post networking craze has been something that I've continued to lean into. I think going to pat myself on the back here. I think I've averaged 40 to 60 connections a year for like
Yeah, that
10
sounds right.
plus years.
I would believe that.
So I've been doing this for a very long time, and that is really, really cool to see. I think something that's easy to forget, and me complaining about inauthenticity, but it is a magic when you're able to bring two people together whose values and interests are just so aligned. And yeah, it's all kinds of dynamics. Like I found people jobs
Mm,
before. Like I've connected, startup founders with investors, mentors with
mhm.
mentees. I did this with
Yeah, that
you
was great.
recently,
And that was
actually.
like, that was a great example of networking going right, where everyone is showing up with their direct intentions. Like the person said, having someone to mentor me into this phase of software engineering would be really nice. You were like, I have two friends. I want them to meet. I'm like, I really like teaching. So it was just like, help the connection happen that was good for everyone that would not have happened were it not for you.
Yeah, those
It was
moments
great.
are
Yeah. Thanks,
beautiful.
man.
Yeah, dude. I mean, thanks for being down for that double
Yeah.
opt-in. Um, yeah, I'm smiling real big now. It's true. Those are very heartwarming moments. Especially when like the connection, it's like you're able to gift connection
Yeah.
to
Oh, I
people that
like
you
that.
in theory like
I,
really
I
care
like
about,
that.
right? Like that's cool, right?
Yeah. I like that framing of gifting connection.
Yeah, I mean, in the intros we write, that's literally what it is, right? It's like that's how I sign off a lot of my connections, like their intros. I'm literally like, hope you guys have a connecting
Yeah.
conversation, or hope you get to connect, right? Like that's yeah, yeah. And there's like, you actually gave me interest. You messaged me after this specific
Mm,
introduction. You kind of messaged me after. I remember you saying that you thought it was a really thoughtfully crafted
yeah.
intro message, and yeah, I mean, for context, I just put in a lot of, I know I was able to, well, I know you very well. And then I was able to get context from both sides to pretty high degree of precision around why I think this would be interesting for both parties and what you were both looking for. Um, and you were both in Hong Kong at the time, and like being able to, I guess, write all that out for both of you. Um, yeah, that's how I think about it, right? You're packaging the gift.
Yeah.
Here's the connection. I think it could work. Here it is.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
forth.
Shout out to Jessica. If you're
Yeah.
listening, you were a great mentee. Hope you learned a lot in the process.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. In all my jadedness, I almost forgot why I do it in the first place.
I
So,
do also get a lot of satisfaction from writing intro messages where I get to hype the people up as well. Like, I don't do the
oh,
thing where
100%.
I write emails where it just says like you both have context, enjoy the conversation. I usually try to include like random details about the people to, I mean, kind of to humanize them, but also I just find that providing just like a tiny bit of a thread for both people to pull on to spark the initial conversation makes a huge difference. It's like the same kind of dynamic where you're talking to someone at a party and then you bring them over to another person. You're like, hey, like you guys both do this thing. You should talk about it. And how helpful of a spark that can create for an initial conversation rather than having them have to like kind of search around for that by like, what are your hobbies? Like, how do you know the host? And just give them like, look, here's the connection. Just take the connection and run with this. I find that really
Exactly.
satisfying.
I'm glad we got to talk about both the dark and
Yeah.
the light sides. I was lost in the dark for a little bit there. So I'm glad you brought back the
When
light.
you're lost in the dark, seek the light. What? That's not the actual phrase. What is it?
I don't know. There's so many. It's,
No, like
it's
the
I don't
Last of Us
know.
thing.
Oh, oh. Yeah, I've been watching too many shows. I also watched The Rings of Power, and then they also have this whole like light dark thing as
Okay,
a
the actual
theme.
phrase is when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. There we go.
Is that a
Yeah.
Firefly thing? Okay, classic. Yeah, uh, man, there's so many things. Like Korra comes to mind as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, maybe we can call it
Yeah.
there.
All right, man. I'm feeling pretty complete and pretty hungry. So, how you feeling now on the way out?
Pretty good. I think I'm still nines. Not too much of a difference. I think I'm still sick, so I feel like I'm gonna start crashing soon, and then we'll need to nap and pass out again. But right now, yeah, nines across the board. Emotionally fulfilled.
Hmm.
Just like I'm glad we started with the jaded
Yeah.
dark stuff, because now I get to bask in the heartwarming memories of all of the meaningful connections that I've
Mhm.
made, which is kind of nice. Yeah. What about you?
I think emotionally, yeah, I'm like still at an 8. I think physically, I'm at like a 6 and falling. Yeah, but I think
Cool, man.
yeah, I think I similarly feel pretty fulfilled and grateful. Just very grateful to have such great people around me that are so willing to connect me to people that I wouldn't get the chance to meet otherwise, and kind of proud of the way in which I've grown in this way.
Yeah, I think maybe one last note is that I feel like it's a very unique flavor of care.
Yeah.
When you do a connection like that, because it's like you thought of both people's like wants and
Yeah.
needs independently, and you drew a line, and you're like, this
Yeah.
could be good,
Yeah, totally.
right? That takes, at least for me, it takes active proactivity and effort. So I always appreciate it when people do that for me. It's like, oh wow, like it's because it's also in a way like a thing you don't even know to ask for.
Yeah, that's true. Frequently you don't.
Yeah, it's like the other person of their own initiative needs to make this connection for you, and then some magic can happen. So
Yeah.
anyway, we can leave it there.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in, you at home or wherever you are in the world. We'll see you in 2
Thanks,
weeks.
y'all.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please help us by leaving a rating on your favorite podcast app. We would really appreciate it because it helps us grow and lets others find the show.
When we're not podcasting, Kevin also makes YouTube videos.
And Jamie has a blog. You can find links to these in the episode description.
The intro music you heard in this episode was made by Harry Dye.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.